Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this old cookbook, published in 1886. This is Mrs. Rorer's Philadelphia Cookbook, a manual of home economies. Now, Mrs. Rorer was a heavyweight in her time. Like, she was one of the go-to recipe writers in that time period. She wrote a lot of her own cookbooks, lots and lots of her own cookbooks, but she also wrote a lot of recipes that were used by other companies, flour companies, baking soda, baking powder, chocolate, all of those sorts of things in their little cooking pamphlets, the ephemera that was handed out to advertise their products. She had her fingers in all of those things, worked non-stop teaching cooking. She also had a number of books that I would consider lifestyle books. And a lot of what she wrote in those lifestyle books doesn't stand up to scrutiny in 2024. But in her straight ahead cookbooks, the recipes are solid. So today we're going to do something called Jackson Snaps. It's on a page that's splattered with all kinds of gunk. I have to imagine that this page was opened quite a bit. I've never heard of Jackson Snaps before. Very simple recipe. It's for a cookie. I've also cut the ingredients in half because I didn't need cookies made with 5 cups of flour. So into the stand mixer, we've got butter and sugar, and we're going to cream that together. So the only flavor in this is lemon. So I've got half a lemon here, and I want to zest half of it and then juice it. And so there's no leavening in this cake at all. All I've got is flour, no baking soda, no baking powder. There isn't even any salt in this mixture. It really is just a very simple recipe. So in goes the egg. And we'll let that mix in completely. And now we add water. I had thought about substituting milk. I thought, kind of in a recipe like this, anywhere that water would go in or that's asked for water, I sometimes think to myself, milk would probably do a better job. But we're going to put in water. It's not going to mix together very well. I kind of knew that was going to happen. And this is the point in the recipe where I start to add in the flour. So that'll pull it together a little bit. Mrs. Rorer wrote a lot of recipes. She had her fingers in a lot of pies. But you know, she was human, and she made mistakes just like everyone else, and some of her work isn't well edited. And I think that shows up on the page that this recipe is on. The recipe doesn't tell me what to do with the lemon rind or the lemon juice. I assume that I mix it in, but it doesn't specifically mention it in the method. You only see it in the ingredient list. I think I'm going to start to put them in right now. So I've got half the flour in. I'm going to put in the lemon juice and the lemon rind. And so people make mistakes. It's no big deal. You sort of have to roll with it and do an interpretation. Putting together a cookbook like this thick with so many recipes, is a monumental task. A monumental task. And I can also see that she pulled recipes from various places in this book, because on the same page, different recipes use different measuring amounts. This one's all in cups. The other ones are by weight, pounds and ounces. So now everything is in the mixing bowl. And here's the problem I'm faced with. I'm supposed to be able to roll this out. It is a sticky, sticky mess. There's no way that I'm going to be able to roll that dough out. So what I'm going to do is, I've got some flour here that I was going to put on the bench so that it didn't stick to the bench when I rolled it out. I'm going to spoon this in. I've got about a 1/4 cup here, and I'm going to see if that helps. These are sort of, even with baking, you've got to know when to make changes and sort of when to pivot and see what's happening. Use your instincts and make changes. Okay, so I'm going to dump that whole 1/4 cup in. And I think that's going to do it. Okay, so I got a little bit more flour. We'll put some down on the bench. Bring the dough over and roll it out. It doesn't say how thick or thin to roll it, so the extra quarter cup of flour that I put in was really needed. So that's the sort of thing. I mean, I know I say this all the time, but people who want to gatekeep the idea of baking are going to kind of pound into your head that baking is a science and you have to be super exact and everything has to be, tickety-boo, and it really isn't. You have to know, or you have to be able to stand there and say, this isn't working, what can I do to fix it? And this was one of those cases where the recipe just doesn't quite work. And it could just be modern ingredients. Could be the size of the egg that I used. The way that the flour is milled today in 2024 versus, in the 1880s. There are so many different things that could have happened. And so as much as there is a science aspect to baking, you also have to be able to think on your feet and make changes. Don't get flustered or frustrated or angry. Just kind of roll with it. Everything works out in the end. Okay, so cut them and put them onto a baking tray. Okay, the oven is preheated to 350 degrees. And as is normally the case, there's no baking time. So I'm going to start looking at these at around the 12-minute mark.
Hurrah, it's time for the cookies.
Okay,
Hey, Glen.
Don't get too excited.
Hey, Fritz.
They're Jackson Snaps.
Okay. They're very pale.
They are very pale. They've got a little bit of color on the bottom side.
Do they snap? No.
No. And that could be I didn't roll them thin enough. There was no instruction about rolling how thin to roll them.
But they're hollow in the middle. I wonder if that is that.
How'd that happen?
I don't know. Is yours hollow?
Yeah, look.
Yeah.
Very light lemon flavor.
Mm-hmm.
No sweetness. There's very little sugar.
Maybe I'm supposed to put jam on it.
Maybe.
They come with instructions on how to eat?
No. The instructions don't even cover all of the ingredients in the ingredient list. So
there's extra ingredients?
Well, there's ingredients that it doesn't tell you when to put them in or even to put them in.
Well,
even though at the beginning of the book, she's very careful to note that these are, but mistakes happen. Mistakes happen. Yeah.
Okay, so if you roll them thinner,
yeah,
and did a dusting of sugar on them,
I would do an egg wash or a milk wash, and then dust some sugar crystals on the top, and that would be a pretty nice little sugar cookie.
Snappy cookie.
Mm-hmm.
They're edible, but not quite right.
Yeah. I'll dip them in my tea. Everything's going to be fine. Okay, so Jackson Snaps. It's a good starting point.
Could be us. Could be the recipe.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Nope. But it's a good starting point to something that you could make into something really great.
I do like the lightness of that.
I know, and I see you grabbing for another one.
I know.
Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.